today we have a world-class musician that knows the Salvation Army, who has, benefited from Salvation Army brass training and the tradition of that and family tradition. And I've seen clinics with our guests here several times, and every single time Phil shares his faith and shares his testimony, and it doesn't matter who the audience is. And he's just been a great example of someone, I think, who is at peace with God and is happy to share that with whoever he comes in contact with. So if we could just welcome Phil Smith, and we thank you so much for coming, and just you can clap and just welcome here today. So Phil, we just want to start similar to what we've done with several other guests, and just tell us about first of all your musical journey, maybe starting out on your instrument and just your path through your professional career.
Yeah, I'll try to make it quick. I hope everybody can hear me. First of all, thank you, Tom, for having me here and for leading this, and thank you, Beth, for inviting me. It's a real privilege to share with everyone there at CMI. I guess the South, where I'm now from, as you can tell, wearing the colors proudly. We just had our TMI experience last week. So anyway, my journey, you won't pick it up from my accent because I'm kind of a New Yorker, but I was born in England. My dad, born in a Salvation Army environment, in a Salvation Army church environment. My dad, as a young man, became Principal Cornet in Her Majesty's Royal Horse Guards, one of England's top bands. If you ever see a band mounted on horseback riding and playing, that was the unit that he was in. And as a young man, he emigrated after the war, World War II, with our family to Canada. He had just done a tour for the Salvation Army over there. And so we went over to Canada. I grew up, I guess I was 4 when we went to Canada. And then a few years later, we moved down to New York. My dad took a position working for the Army and playing principal cornet in the New York Staff Band under Richard Holtz at the time. And so at 7, we moved down to New York, moved on to Long Island, grew up on Long Island outside of New York. Went through school, loved music. That time when you're in 12th grade and your guidance counselor says, what are you going to do? What are your plans? And I was like, I don't know. And the guidance counselor says, well, it looks like you like music. You got a lot of music courses and you do really good in those. So that was the goal. At the time, a young lady by the name of Carol Dawn Reinhardt, who herself was a famous young trumpet player studying at Juilliard. I think she whispered into my dad's ears that, I might want to audition for the music schools in New York. So I took an audition for Juilliard, Manhattan, and just in case, I applied to Queens College for music ed. Well, I got into both Juilliard and Manhattan. The flashing lights of Juilliard captured me, and off I went to Juilliard and studied with Carol Dawn Reinhardt's teacher, Edward Troidel. And those were wonderful years. I went in as a young SA cornet player, having a pretty sound, very feminine approach to the cornet. And this gentleman was really great. He never told me not to do anything. He always added something else to the palette. And in that process, I think I developed as a trumpet player, but still kept some of the characteristics that were just naturally mine as a SA cornet player. I went through school there, studied for 3 years with him, switched over to, at that time, the first trumpet player with the New York Philharmonic, Bill Vacchiano, because I felt while I'd learned a lot from Mr. Troidel, he was doing yeoman's work to make me the best trumpet player I could be. I felt I was a little behind in the orchestral side of things. I didn't know repertoire. I didn't transposition. Are you kidding me? Who wants to transpose? So I asked Mr. Vacchiano if he'd take me on, and he did. And so for my 4th year at Juilliard and my 1st year of masters, I studied with Bill Vacchiano. I got a real crash course in orchestral lit, and in transposition. He would have my head spinning. He would say, Smith, the trumpet of the future is the D trumpet. And he says, now pretend you got a D trumpet in your hand, you're playing this piece and it says trumpet and E. What's your first note? And I'd be like, I don't know. And he'd say, Smith, what's the matter with you? And he'd start solfeging stuff in the transposition key. And I'm going, man, my solfege is on fixed la. I just go la, 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 la. So anyway, that was the background that I had. I decided to take my first audition, and I applied to various places. I applied to Calgary Orchestra in Canada, which is funny because my brother-in-law now is the first trombone in that orchestra. But they didn't even give me they weren't kind enough to even respond. I applied to the orchestra in Hawaii. They wrote back and said I didn't have enough experience. Well, yeah, duh. I was coming out of school. And then I wrote to Miami, and they actually gave me a time, but it conflicted with a staff band weekend, and I was getting a scholarship from the staff band, so I felt obliged to do that. And the first orchestra that really heard me was the Chicago Symphony. That was the fourth orchestra I applied to. And I went out there just to see what an audition was like. And lo and behold, at the end of the whole thing, I was declared the winner. There was nobody more shocked than me, and frightened than me. I really, I was a lick learner. I knew the licks to play in the audition, but I didn't really know all the pieces. And that became pretty evident, I think, pretty fast. But I had 3 wonderful years in Chicago Symphony, learned a lot, sat with a great orchestra, just heard so much great music and great trumpet playing, brass playing, orchestral playing, learned how to play in an environment like that. I absorbed it all like a sponge. Mr. Herseth out of Herseth, affectionately called Bud, was a real mentor to me. He was sort of like a musical father, and he encouraged me to apply for the principal job in the New York Philharmonic. And so that was my second audition, and lo and behold, I won that one. And so then I had a 36-year career as principal trumpet in the New York Philharmonic. So 3.5 years in Chicago, 36 in New York. And then after I retired from the New York Philharmonic, the University of Georgia asked me to come down and teach here. Fred Mills, who many of you might know from the Canadian Brass, when he retired from Canadian Brass, he came to teach here. And he had me down to the university numerous times, and I thought, this is a beautiful environment, just a lovely school, and I loved everything about it. And so when he unfortunately passed away, they came asking. I didn't accept it right away. I still wanted to continue playing, so for a few years I did that. And when it popped up open again, and it came back, I thought it was a little bit like some of those jokes you hear about the Lord sending help and us turning it away. I thought, well, maybe the Lord's made this door open again and it shouldn't have opened again, and maybe I need to pay attention. And so at that point, prayed about it, came down here, and decided that while it may be a little early to leave New York, it was a good time. In fact, it wasn't early to leave New York, because no sooner had I accepted the position here than I got struck with something that's called focal dystonia, which, in a layman's term, it would be like you finding out that you forgot how to ride a bike, and you couldn't figure out how to ride the bike again. That's basically what happened to me. It's a physiological, muscular, psychological condition, and it was like I forgot how to play the trumpet, and it was tragic. There was nobody more bummed out than me. It ripped my heart out. But perhaps it was the Lord's way to get me to make a move that perhaps I was hesitant about making. Come down to University of Georgia, having been through that experience and still going through that experience. It's really informed me and affected me as to how I teach, and perhaps given me a bit more patience with myself as well as my students, and a bit more encouragement in my spirit and out of my lips to my students, because I tended to be hard on myself. And through that experience, thank the Lord, He's given me the ability to play the horn, to continue to get better in the horn. Could I go back and play the job that I had? I don't think so. But you know what? I love what I'm doing right now, and I still get to play extra with the Atlanta Symphony and with the Charleston Symphony, and so that's fun for me. So anyway, in a nutshell, that was it. Grew up in the Salvation Army, played in the junior bands like you all played in the divisional bands, went to Star Lake Music Camp, did the whole thing. When we were in Chicago, guested out at CMI and stuff like that. So just know what you're all going through.
Yeah, we've been talking a lot this week about leadership and how important it is, our communication with other people, when we're up in front of a group, but also when we're teaching the beginners and all those things, and all the great things that you just talked about, and knowing your career and the great career that you've had. I feel like, and I don't know why you mentioned it, but I feel like the thing that sticks out to me is your high school guidance counselor pointing you in that direction. And I'm sure that's not the reason, why you went into music. That was probably an important time, an important person to kind of help speak that into you.
Well,
Um,
absolutely. An important person who helps you look at what you're doing, because as a young teenager, let's face it, we're all scatterbrained, and we're thinking about lots of things. And at that moment, just to sort of focus you in and say, well, listen, here's the truth. Every single one of you at CMI, every single young person that's here at University of Georgia, you have all been gifted, sometimes with obvious gifts, playing your instrument. Many times, almost always, with gifts you don't even know about. And part of growing up and having mentoring people, whether that's the guidance counselor or my dad as my teacher, or a young junior band director, or Mr. Herseth when I was out of college, someone who helps look at your life and helps mentor you, and has a little bit of worldly wisdom and godly wisdom to direct you in paths. Have those kind of people speak into you is important. But you are all gifted. You wouldn't be at CMI if you didn't, first of all, love to play, if you weren't involved in the Salvation Army, and more importantly, had a relationship with Jesus Christ. And that is the most important thing. If you get nothing else out of CMI, get in tune with Jesus Christ and in your faith walk, because that Holy Spirit mentoring will speak into your life and lead you in ways that are wonderful.
That's great. We'll get into some nuts and bolts. I know that you have things prepared, but we just want to hear from you. You've had all these mentors and everything that you've talked about, but what is the Phil Smith philosophy of music making?
The Phil Smith philosophy of music making is sing and make music in your heart to the Lord. Give thanks to God through Jesus Christ. It's about singing. It's singing. Enjoy the music. If music making, if you're, and I'll speak just from a trumpet player, if playing the cornet, playing the trumpet makes you angry and makes you frustrated and all of that, toss that out or get rid of it. Do something with it. Get it out of there, because that will only negatively affect you. You're playing. Thank God for the gift that you got, the obvious gift that you got. That is that you love music making, and use it to bless others. Use it to find personal enjoyment, and through the process, you'll find personal growth as well.
That's perfect. It's really, really well said. Now let's get into some nuts and bolts. We've heard from other people, but we want to hear what makes a good practice session, and just basics to cover as a brass musician.
Well, one of the things that I often talk about is, whenever you go, let's say you're going to go and audition for music camp or college, or you have a challenge in your high school band, or any kind of audition that you're doing. The thing that captures the listener, those who are adjudicating you, the thing that captures them most and immediately is the quality of your sound. Sound is king. That's the phrase I use all the time. Sound is king. You may think technique is king. You may be wowed by people who've got wonderful technique. Great, I'm all for technique. But if technique is your thing at the expense of sound, you got a problem. You may think that high notes, hey man, I want to be John Faddis. I want to be the guy that's screaming on top, Wayne Bergeron. I want that kind of thing in my life. Great, no problem. But you know what? You listen to those two guys that I just mentioned, and they are not pinchy tight, scream it tight, and pinching out this high note. When they play a high G, or even going to a double high C, it is like as big as a house. It is not, it's like wah, and it's in tune, and it's got sound and core in it. And, hey, that's not for me. I can't hit those notes. But sound is king. If you're a jazzer like Marvin Stamm, like Wynton Marsalis, sound is king. Sound has to be there. If you learn the rest of the trade, learn how to play jazz. Don't be just a stand-up and kind of bit bop and waggle your fingers and hope it comes out. Learn jazz, learn chordal things, learn how to tie those all together. Learn how to play up high. Learn all the technique and all the other things with it, but always remember sound is king. So that's the biggest, most important thing in whatever your practice is. Even if you're doing, I'm sitting in my studio right now at home, even if you're playing your da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, Bud Hurst had a saying that he said, never practice, always perform. So even when, and Chickowitz, oh no, that's not Chickowitz. That was someone else. Oh, I've lost my Chickowitz study. But those of you that know Chickowitz know the study, and I'm having a senior moment. Going through those kind of studies. Always perform them. They're played with the most beautiful sound. They're played with shape. They're played with magnificence, with beauty. You never just go da 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 dee da dee da dee da. Yeah, big deal. Who cares, right? So sound is king. Anything else? Did I cover that?
Yeah. So can you just take us through maybe a practice session? You're saying, sound is king, but now what do we do? Like, are you starting with, what are the fundamentals and the things that you would recommend, to some of our young musicians?
People often talk to me and say, well, why don't you write a book? Well, that's because there's been too many books. Why do we don't need another Bible. We got the Bible. So the idea is read the Bible, use the Bible. There are a number of books out there that help you. If you're having trouble trying to figure out how to practice, I might suggest, and I'm just looking for it here and I don't have it, is a wonderful book by Michael Sachs, S-A-C-H S, S-A-C-H-S, Michael Sachs, and it's a green book published by International Music, and it's a primer, if you will, on how to practice, and it goes through various things. Let me, before I delve into that a little bit, let me say this. Some people, I'm reluctant to give a routine because some people become a routine person. And routine is just that. Hey man, it's just routine. So practice can be different things at different times. I like to basically start slow. I like to find the middle of the range, the best tone that I can have, the most vibrant, beautiful tone that I can have. And color it, let there be a little bit of shape and a little bit of vibration in that, a little bit of vibrato, just color that tone. And then I like to move that sound out. Di-ya-ram, di-ya-ram, da-di-da-di-da-di-da-di-dam, da-di-da-da-di-da-di-da-dam. So you see, I'm kind of going from G. I sort of pick G, but other times I might pick C on the staff. Other times I might pick low C on the bottom of the staff. But I kind of want to start in the middle of where I think I have good tone and move it out. And I like to move chromatically. Let me say this, that the first thing that I want to get going is air. I want to make sure, because that's what sound is. Sound is freedom of air through lips that vibrate. I want to move air. I want to get air going. So that could be long tones. That can be chromatic. Da, 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 da. That can be scalic. Da, 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 da. That could be long tones. D, D. And it's freedom. It's just gentle. Now you say to me, well, how long do I do that? As long as you like. I don't care. You could spend all day doing that if you like, if that's helpful to you and you find that that's kind of helpful. But I want to get air moving. That's the first thing. The next thing I want to get going is I want to get air and fingers. So I'm still slurring. Basically, I've got one articulation at the front of the note. And air and fingers, I can be going. I can be moving air and fingers. I'm now not moving slowly, moving air slowly and fingers slowly, but I'm beginning to move, you know, where I'm moving intervallically and finger-wise, and I'm letting air move, and fingers are moving, and there's motion. The third thing is air and tongue. Da-da-da-da-dum, 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 da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-dum. Maybe not just thirds, maybe fourths. Dun 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 dun. Maybe fifths. Dun 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 bum 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 bum. So that you're moving around. Don't get stuck in the routine of something. Go out the box. Break the routine. So air, air fingers, air tongue, air fingers tongue. By then, that's a basic general guide of how you can fit in lots of different studies that other people have written. The opening, say, of the Chikowitz studies, that's into air, and that's air, moving air and sound. That's getting that way. So that's kind of where I'm going. Now, to me, let me just add this one other quick thing. It's better to have multiple practice times in a day. If you can get 2 or 3 30-minute sessions, that's probably healthier than one sit and crash bang session. Number one, you can organize yourself. You can say, well, for the first 30 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, I'll do this kind of what I just talked about. Air, air fingers, air tongue, air fingers tongue. I'll do that I'll do exercises in that concept for 30 minutes. The next 30 minutes, let me practice on some of the things I love to play. You know, or some of the great Salvation Army solos. And by the way, don't be afraid to play Salvation Army solos. They're better than most solos on the outside. If you can play a so good Salvation Army solo, you've got some great stuff there. And maybe the last 30 minutes, you're playing melodies. Could be playing hymn tunes. Could be playing songs out of one of the books that I like to use, and is very common in studios today, is by Phil Snedeker, and they're called, where I can't find where it is, Lyric Etudes by Phil Snedeker. You see his name down in there, and those are beautiful melodic studies. So you want some technical things to play, some warming up sound oriented things, and then you want some melodic things. Those are things you want to play. Okay.
Yeah, that's great. We're also obviously talking about leadership this week as well. We're learning, you know, just because you're sitting in a section of a band or an orchestra, does not mean that you're not a leader. And I don't know if you can speak, this may be an odd question, and maybe, I don't know, maybe you're used to answering this, but can you just talk about your leadership as the principal of the London Phil or the New York Philharmonic, and just talk about maybe some leadership things that you had to develop, or maybe some things that you had to kind of grow into, as a leader in that orchestra.
Well, the first thing is funny. It's a great question, and the first thing that jumped to my mind, literally, the first thing that just jumped to my mind because I wasn't thinking about this. I can remember having a bit of fun. When I first joined the Chicago Symphony, you have principal Adolf Herseth, second trumpet Charles Geyer, third trumpet and assistant principal William Scarlett, and fourth trumpet Phil Smith. And I used to have a bit of fun with that, and I would refer to myself as I am principal fourth trumpet. And so no matter where you sit, maybe fourth chair in the section, you are principal of that seat. You are the principal person sitting there. Let's look at it that way. And so, what in terms of leadership, what does that mean? That means what I learned from all of those guys I just mentioned as a youngster coming into the professional scene was integrity. They practiced their parts. They didn't show up at the first rehearsal not having looked at the music. They knew that music ahead of time. They had listened to recordings of it. They had looked at the music. They had figured out the notes. They knew rhythmically where everything was. And they had personal integrity to make sure that their part was best, as good as it could be played. And that is leadership. That is absolute leadership. How that related to the leadership from Bud Herseth or Bill Scarlett when he was playing first was that they laid it down, and it was my job or Charlie Guy's job as the second trumpet sitting next to those guys to listen to them. And here's another element of leadership: know when to subvert yourself, know when to pull yourself back and accept someone else's leadership, and you join in and become their shadow. You join in sonically with them. You join in rhythmically with them. You do everything you can to be exactly where they are. Rather than they maybe are a smidge high, your job isn't to sit there and go, oh, you're wrong. Here's where in tune is. No, your job is make him look great. That's if he's a little high, according to my ears, number one, who knows? I may be wrong myself, but let me match him and let me be where he is. Let me make him my leader be let me give him integrity. I'm giving honor to him as the principal at that moment. And that's an element of integrity, but it's also an element of knowing when to subvert yourself and when to accept your position. The other thing that I learned from lots of different places was that, I learned this fundamentally from Bud Herseth and also from Bill when I was in Chicago Symphony, is that they came in and they played it consistently, right? So Bud Herseth didn't come in, or Bill didn't come in and play Tuesday morning's rehearsal one way and then stylistically change it sort of ad nauseum, just I'm just going to change how I play that. Let's say that it's don da dee da don da dee da. Okay, well they could have come in on the first rehearsal and played da da dee da dee da dee da, and very straight rhythm. Well, unless the conductor said something to change that, they didn't come in the second rehearsal and go dum da ding da dum da dee dum, which is as valid a way to play it. But they were committed to what they were doing, and my job then, so they laid it out, and my job was to be right there. I may have actually enjoyed the second way I've done it, but my job was to do it their way and be with them. So that the leadership part of that was that they laid down a consistent pattern for me to follow. And therefore, in doing so, they didn't have to be talking down the line. It really annoys me when I have leaders telling me what I need to constantly be doing. Tell me once if you need to. but don't keep telling me unless I'm screwing up. If you keep telling me, I'm thinking, am I screwing up? Am I screwing up? No, lay it out, make it clear. And the best way to make it clear is for you, the leader, to be consistent in how you play. And then everyone else can follow in. When Bud played it, bam, it was that way. And you all followed suit. He played hearts, you played hearts. He played spades, you played spades. That's just the way it was. You didn't change a suit because you thought it was better to do it. So that's an element of leadership. Another element of leadership that quickly comes to mind is that if, as a leader, you do have to talk, because sometimes you do. I would try to be consistent in that, and by the time we got to Thursday, the fourth rehearsal, well, probably the third rehearsal, if it wasn't going right, if people hadn't cottoned on to what I was doing, then at that point, a leader has to step in. A leader just doesn't take a back seat and say, c'est la vie. A leader steps in and addresses the issue. But the way to address the issue is not you. No, all that does is get my dukes up ready for a fight. But if you say, it may be me, but we don't seem to be matching intonation there. Can we just try that and get that together? That little self-deprecation lead is a better way at achieving a successful thing. If you come at someone with all that does is get someone else on the defensive and put them in a fight mode and a conflict mode. So it's always talk in terms of we. Let's see if we can get the section to be unified in this. Let's see if we can align our rhythm. Let's see if we can align our intonation, and go at it that way. Now, it may mean down the line you have to say, can you just try that? Can you raise that a little bit? Can you lower that a tad? Let's see how that works. Yeah, hey, that's it. That's the way it works. And then you've established leadership. You've exercised leadership, but you've allowed the other person under there to sort of exercise their involvement. So those are some qualities that immediately come to mind.
Yeah, and those, I feel like what you just described can transfer to almost anything. Like that's your trumpet, experience. But I think that could transfer to any kind of leadership, situation that we're in. We're about halfway through this, and this has been fantastic, but we want to open up to some question and answer times. If there are people in the live stream that have some questions, feel free to type those in the chat. But also, if there's anyone here in person that has questions, we do want you to come up and just speak into the microphone so everyone can hear your question at least. So are there any questions so far for Phil Smith?
While they're thinking about that, let me give you a couple. I love quotes. I love people's quotes and some quotes that sort of help us in some of the issues that we were just talking about. Wonderful quote by Benjamin Franklin. Looking back to our American heritage, failing to prepare is preparing to fail. Wonderful quote. Another, Vince Lombardi, great football coach, right? And I love this quote. It says, the only place that success comes before work is in the dictionary. The only place that success comes before work is in the dictionary. And then an American pastor said this: spectacular achievement is always preceded by unspectacular preparation. We've seen that exercised in the Olympics. Spectacular achievement. Good grief, did you see? Man, they did oh golly. They didn't just show up and do that. Spectacular achievement is always preceded by unspectacular preparation. And then Abraham Lincoln, give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I'll spend the first 4 sharpening the axe. Right? Doing his homework, doing his practice, not just showing up and cutting the tree down. So anyway.
We have a question here.
I should look into the camera. Okay. Hello, Mr. Smith.
Hi, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Okay, so you grew up playing cornet, and you mentioned that when you were going to school, your trumpet playing took on a cornet-y approach. was very sweet. I'm in a similar boat. I'm going to school for trumpet. So, and you still have to switch between those two things, I'm assuming. So what's your approach to cornet versus your approach to playing trumpet?
Okay. Let's here you go. There's the trumpet. There's the cornet. Both of them sit in my studio right next to each other, and I play them each and every day. Well, that's a lie. I don't play them each and every day. When I practice, I play them each and every practice session. That's the true part. They are different animals, right? It's a little bit like alligators and crocodiles. They're different animals. They kind of look similar, but they different shaped snouts and things like that. Well, the cornet's got a different kind of mouthpiece than a trumpet. So the tools are different. The tool itself, the cornet's different to the trumpet. The mouthpieces are different. Now, I will admit, I will truthfully admit that as when I was playing cornet, when I was playing cornet and trumpet, I would use the same rim. So I was trying to be consistent with the rim, and I would screw in an underpart. So at times I would use a Bach underpart, but a Bach, to be honest with you, Bach underparts are, we're into trumpet tech talk here. Bach underparts are kind of small trumpet mouthpiece they're the same thing as a trumpet mouthpiece, but with a cornet shank. But you may get a wick underpart that you can screw in there, right? So if you're dealing with having to do both of those things and you find that the change in rim is creating a little bit of chaos, that's an idea that you can have. On the other hand, if you can find a mouthpiece that works, I still use my trumpet mouthpiece, which is a Bach 1C rim on a Bach 5B underpart that's been opened up to a 23 throat and a 24 backbore. That's the mouthpiece that I played in orchestras for my career, basically. But then I've got a new mouthpiece that Greg Black has made for cornet, which is really lovely, and it's so there's a different sound, right? So if I just play that on the trumpet, and I don't try to do anything different, but I simply put that cornet mouthpiece in there, it's a different sound. So right off the bat, I got different sound, and embrace those differences of sound, right? So that's dealing with the sound issue. Now, dealing with the style issue, I can, as I said to you, I came in with my background on cornet, having a sort of a sweeter quality, if you will, to the way I approach things, a softer, more genteel quality. The trumpet is another animal, right? The trumpet is meant to be, we use the trumpets in war, right? You sound, the scriptures got, who shall prepare for battle if I play an uncertain sound, right? The trumpets were used to call the Israelites to gather, to battle, whatever. So trumpets are bugles. They're meant to lay it out. So you embrace that difference. You play one more sweetly, and the other one naturally is more bravado. Okay, but I can also play the trumpet and make it sound pretty and sweet, and I can also play the cornet and make it sound more bravado. And the repertoire's demands can sometimes dictate that, right? If I'm playing that may be the wrong key. I can never remember keys, but you get the idea. That's Call of the Righteous, right? And that the whole cornet section plays it. Well, it can be played. I don't want it to be playing it sweet and pretty and with nice little vibrato. I want it to have some trumpetiness to it. So my point is that it's embrace what each instrument is. You got to use a mouthpiece that works in each instrument. I tend to want, when we first started the brass band here at the University of Georgia, we had long model cornets, which I inherited, which I don't like, because to me a cornet should have a shepherd's crook, and it should be built to sound like a cornet, not built to be almost a trumpet. But a lot of the kids had Bach mouthpieces, and the first thing I did was I got them all off that, and we all got onto Wick mouthpieces or similar cornet mouthpieces. And now the sound of the band just immediately changed from one rehearsal to the next rehearsal. And so that is a sound difference that I think one has to embrace. Does that help?
Yeah, I think so. And also, to go back to your first comment, like, you got to play as if you're singing.
Yeah.
And you have throughout this entire interview, you have sang several times, which is, again, a great example. Like, you are just exuding music, in a singing style. And I think that's a good example as well. Any other questions? Any questions in the chat? We've got another question here.
Hi, Phil.
Hi, how you doing?
Good. Dave Bartel from Rockford Temple.
Right.
And I remember you coming to CMI as a kid, playing an entire solo with just your mouthpiece. Sorry, you're over there. Here. And buzzing, and that was quite a few decades ago. Do you still work that way with your kids and suggest a lot of buzzing in private lessons and for a good tone quality? Is that still something that you still?
No, to be honest with you, no. And this is what I spoke about earlier, was that the my situation with, I was a heavy buzzer. I buzzed a lot. Living in New York and having to commute to work, I would get in the car at 8 o'clock and sometimes not get to work at Lincoln Center until 9:30. So what do you do for that hour and a half? I'd get my mouthpiece out and I'd buzz, and I'd be buzzing. And I am not going to, I'm just giving you now my viewpoint, okay? Because there will be people who are heavy buzzers, but my viewpoint has changed over the years, and especially having gone through the dystonia thing. And that is that I found when I went and worked with students that studied with a heavy emphasis on buzzing, their tones tended to be very tight. And I would be having to say, okay, can we try to do lip bends? And immediately, as they came back to the note that they were tight on, they bent down and they came back, the note was more open. Why? Because in order to do a lip bend, you have to open the aperture. And when you come back, the aperture is more open and you have a more vibrant note. So that was one thing that was obvious to me before I had dystonia. The other thing is that with dystonia, where the muscles and the muscles, but more importantly, the nerves that make everything work, they freaked out. They're saying, we're not doing this anymore. That's why they call it dystonic. It's a focused dystonia. They're not going to function. And so in order to do that, I had to restart as if I was starting from the beginning. First thing was blowing air through lips. Now putting the mouthpiece on there, not putting the mouthpiece on and going, let me find just the right sweet spot to get it in. No. So the aperture is open. You can see the aperture is open. I would blow through straws. In order to, my initial blowing through straws was just a big Slurpee straw, just to break it away from anything metal and anything having to do with the trumpet. Can you just blow down a straw? Eventually, I would turn it into the silver straw, which is just a lead pipe. Then I would put that over, and I'd blow into the back end of a mouthpiece. So I was reteaching myself that it's air through lips, air through lips. My dad would say, son, let's go in the basement and have a blow. He never said, son, let's go in the basement and have a buzz, right? So sometimes the old timers have it right. So now what happens is when you do this, now if I simply blow hard enough, I'm going to get a tone. Why? Because of science. Nothing else other than science. I get back pressure here, which creates back pressure, comes back, and it makes the lips flap. They do not buzz. Our lips do not buzz. All I'm doing is blowing more air past these lips. And as the air gets trapped in the instrument, the lead pipe, or the instrument, when I add that, it creates back pressure and it comes back, and that back pressure makes those lips vibrate. They just go like this. I can prove that to you if you go to physics, trumpet physics on YouTube. Look up trumpet physics and John Harbaugh. His last name is spelled Harbaughh. Trumpet physics, John Harbaugh. You look it up, and about 5 minutes in, he makes a 3-foot long glass pipe, which is about 2 inches wide. He makes that pipe make a sound. That pipe doesn't have lips. It doesn't have anything. So there's nothing vibrating. And he does it simply by energizing air through that pipe, which is what we're doing. So no, I do not spend an inordinate amount of time on buzzing. I find that counterproductive. I do find it helpful because at some point in my rehabilitation, I was so loose that I had to find a way to bring it back a little bit. So I may just do a small tad, but minuscule. I would rather play softly chromatic scales. Where my lips have to find how they function without having to be open on the bottom and tight on the top, but they find the median place.
Yeah, that's great. I also kind of want a Slurpee now.
Yeah.
But so we have about 15, 20 minutes. So I just want to like all of the trumpet playing and leadership and all of those things. Bill, can you just talk to us a little bit about all that correlating to your spiritual walk and just how your playing has impacted that and vice versa, your walk with the Lord?
Well, look, let's be honest. Your spiritual work is your spiritual work. We are all sinners. A lot of us don't like to think about that, but we are. The Bible tells us always go with what the Bible tells us. Do not ever go with just your opinion. Always check your opinion to what the Bible says. The Bible says that we are all sinners and that we are through grace we have been saved, and that not of ourselves, but it comes from God, and it comes through faith in God. The fact that we look at the life of Jesus, we look at who he said he was, we look at what he did, we look at what he took to the cross, we look at him taking our sin on the cross, and we look at him being killed on the cross, we look at him being resurrected 3 days later, defeating death, and we put our faith and our trust in that, in him and that experience. And that is regardless of me being a trumpet player, or regardless of you being a plumber or a carpenter or a housemaker or a teacher or anything else. That has to be dealt with anyway. Okay, so that's the first thing. You are more, as I said, some of us are gifted in music and some of us enjoy music, and that's great. That's it. But I'm more than a trumpet player. If my life's worth was only as a trumpet player, I would be a sad person, because I can't play to the extent that I used to be able to play. And maybe the Lord allowed me to go through that, to experience that my identity is not just in the trumpet. I think one of the things, as I also said, was that there are probably other gifts in you that you don't even know about. And I would challenge you to go looking for those and to try different things. How do you find them? Usually through unintended circumstances. I was asked at one point to teach Sunday school. And I was a very shy guy. I was not a talker. But I have no problem nowadays standing in front of any crowd of 2 or 2,000 and talking. I don't get upset about that or worried about that. And a lot of that came out of being challenged to be a Sunday school teacher. Now, I still had to do my homework because I didn't want to just teach what Phil Smith thought. I had to go looking. And so I had to read and study God's word and use commentaries and listen to other teachers and think about what they said and analyze that and work that through. But through that process, I'm quite comfy. So we on occasion have Bible studies here at school. And I'm comfortable to do that. So challenge yourself to find out what other gifts you have. You may have other gifts to do with just graciousness in serving others and being with elderly people, like we've got my mother-in-law here, and learning how to deal with some of the trials and tribulations of elderly people and the issues that they have in their life. It forces you to adapt. So find those gifts. So I don't know if Tom, if I've answered your question per se, but basically your faith walk is your walk through life, no matter what you do, and it will color everything that you do. It will color your profession. It will color your avocation. It will color everything that you do, and that's one thing. One of the things I love about CMIs and TMIs and all those things, and Salvation Army camps and other denominational events, Masterworks Festival or things like that, is that not only are we working to enhance and improve the gifts that we've got, but we're also speaking into the soul to bring people into relationship with Jesus Christ. That's the most important thing. That has eternal significance. My trumpet playing doesn't have eternal significance. It's just something that happened. There'll be someone coming along behind me who can play higher, faster, louder, prettier, longer, all of those things. But my relationship with Jesus Christ has an eternal significance to me, and hopefully to those that I mentor and deal with within my family and within my students and others.
Yeah, and I think the theme for me lately is just identity, just in general in society and culture and everything. And I think you hit the nail on the head. Like our identity has to be in Christ, and it starts there. Even though, and it's great to hear that from you, because people would label Phil Smith as the world's greatest trumpet player. I mean, I've heard that so many times when your name comes up. But to hear you say, no, my identity is in Jesus Christ, and that's way more important than anything, any label, other people are going to put on me. And I think that speaks volumes to that. We have one more question, I think. There could be more questions, but I know we have at least one more.
Hey, Phil, again. I'm going to ask something that I'm curious about. This is not from the chat. First of all, I just want to say how much I appreciate your honesty in terms of the recent top things that you've been going through. I think it seems to be the elephant in the room a lot of times with trumpet players that nobody ever wants to admit when they're having problems, right? So my question is kind of along those lines. I know it seems that most people at some point in their playing career go through some sort of an issue, whether that be their range all of a sudden, dips off, or they have shifted their embouchure slightly, or they're having articulation issues. I know in the past couple of years, I've dealt with a few things and I've tried to figure out how to solve those and come back. But I just think sometimes we don't talk about those. So I'm wondering if at any point in your career you ever dealt with any of those things and would have advice to anybody how to overcome them in terms of working on fundamentals and bringing those things back into their playing.
Yeah, I mean, we just had, I was just thinking, I haven't been a great Olympic watcher this year for lots of reasons. But we've had some wonderful things to look at this year. We've had the Simone Biles, I'm hoping I'm saying her name correctly, who, you know, something happened, something sent her off her game, and she didn't feel that she could compete to the best of her ability. We've had some other people that stepped up and just gave it a go, and lo and behold, man, they, you know, it's the world opened for them. As you said, things will happen. First of all, be kind to yourself. You're not a machine. Don't panic. Don't fear. This is one of my verses that's on my stand, and it says, "Be strong and courageous. Do not be terrified. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go." So that's, by the way, that's from Joshua 1:9. Don't be fearful. Don't be discouraged. Don't panic. None of that's going to be helpful as a performer. Things happen. Take time, step back, go back to the basics, work on those basics, go back to what worked. Slow yourself down. Don't panic. It's in the panic that we get in trouble. It's in the panic. Someone has said about not about me per se, but about focal dystonia in specific, that people with focal dystonia are inefficient players. Well, let me be clear. One could not have had my career as an inefficient player. My career would have ended decades ago. But something happened and inefficiency did creep in. There's no doubt about that. And so as I've had to learn to replay and learn to teach myself and not panic and go back to good sound principles, I've been able to reteach myself to play to some capacity. And so yes, if you panic, you will find areas of inefficiency that will creep in and become problematic. So slow down, take time off, step away. In general, even when things are going great, keep your mouth shut. Don't begin to believe your own press. If you read your press and begin to believe it, pride goeth before the fall, because you will fall. It will happen. You will have trouble in this world. Right? Scripture tells us that. But don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. I'm with you. So that's God's messages all the time. Don't always take any teacher's advice as sacrosanct. Let me read you a quote. I told you I love quotes. Here's a quote from Dennis Wick. If you don't know Dennis Wick, he's a great trombone player. And he said this, I've got this from a lady who helped me out a lot with my focal dystonia. He said, this is his quote, he says, "The players, who themselves are teachers, the players do what they do. They tell their students what they think they do. The students then try to do what they think the teachers think they said about what they think they do." So it all gets, you know, if there's not one way to do this, there is one way in the Christian life. Let me be clear about that. Jesus is the way, the truth, the life. No one comes to the Father but through him. But when it comes to trumpet playing, be careful what you read. Try things. Most people will be talking the same thing, but some people will say, well, you should start high and then go low. Some people say, well, you should start low and go high. Some people will say, you start in the middle and spread out. Try it. See what works for you. But within that, there are certain basic fundamentals. Evenness, air, fingers, air, tongue, all that thing I spoke about. Relaxation. The mind is free. The mind is singing. Sing, sing, sing and make music. Another great quote from Arnold Jacobs. playing your instrument is not tonguing, fingering, and buzzing, but it is hearing the song in your head and recreating it. It starts by hearing a song in our head. That's where it goes. If I said to you all right now, think Jesus loves me. Hopefully, as musicians, that song is in your head. And then if I asked you to play it, I would hope that you would play it. Some people have said things, I've seen this happen in master classes. I've had kids come up and play, and they just kind of make a mess of it. And then I say, or other teachers have said, okay, who's your favorite player? Don't tell me, just who's your favorite player? Now, pretend you're that person and play it the way you hear that person playing it. And immediately there's an improvement. Immediately, because the person is not thinking about what's coming out of their bell, but they've gone into their mind and they're recreating what they hear their favorite player play. So those are all things to do. Don't panic. Slow down.
Phil, we want to thank you so much for your time. We know you're a busy guy. If anyone else, check out the University of Georgia Brass Band. And, Phil leads that band now as a teacher at that university. But again, Phil, we want to thank you. If we could just thank Phil again for this session.